Hello and welcome to Why We Write. I'm your host, Randall Vire. My guest today is Professor Phillip Arrington of Eastern Michigan University's Department of English Language and Literature. Dr. Arrington teaches composition, rhetoric, and literature at EMU and is the author of Rhetoric's Agons, published in 2008, as well as the e-novel The Serpent Sage, published on Amazon.com in 2013. His forthcoming work is The Wounded Word, Violence and the Rhetorical Tradition. Professor Arrington has published academic articles in such journals as American Literature, College English, College Composition and Communication, and the Journal of Advanced Composition. Professor Arrington, welcome to Why We Write.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad you're here. And I think I made all three of those journal titles into sound like one, but at any rate, yes,
right.
plenty of opportunities for your writing to be found. You've written poetry, and you write about rhetoric and writing itself, which leads me to my first question. Why do you write, and then why do we write?
Well, it is easier to answer for myself. First, before I speak about the we, I probably, if I'd have taken matters very seriously when I was younger, I might not be writing at all. My first memory of writing was involving my mother's red lipstick tube, and I wrote her a scrawl of a message. I couldn't even write, I couldn't form letters at the time, on her freshly painted bedroom wall. And she was not happy about that and chased me through the house with the fly swatter, which was her weapon of choice. And I managed to escape, but for some reason that didn't stop me. So I kept on writing, and I've even written about that experience in days that I've shared with students.
Do you remember the message?
No, I was too young to know letters.
Yes,
I was just imitating what she did, or what I thought she was doing.
Right.
And I didn't have a crayon, but her lipstick was there on her bureau, and I made use of it, much to her sorrow.
I can see the picture of that happening. Do you think there's something compelling about why we write, as the human experience? What is writing to us, or
I think there is, and historians will tell us about writing as a device of memory to store our memories and to remember more once you can't remember simply orally. But I think there's another dimension to it. Writing is, what I like about it is having written. That's the most fun. Having written. The writing is not always that fun. I do like to have projects. I do like to be working on projects. I'm working on one right now. Before I was working on this new project, I was in a kind of a glum state. I was morose. And then I started on this new project, and my energy level has picked back up. But anyone who writes for a long time will tell you that it's lonely. It's lonely work. It's long. It's hard. It's painful. The rejection is painful. The mountains of rejection is painful. If you're going to write, you better be ready for that.
Yeah, and you're talking about all levels of writing. Not just creative writing, but academic.
Academic writing. You sometimes may have to send in an article 2 or 3 different times before you can get it past an academic journal's editorial board. You may have to get it rejected 10 or 20 times before you find the right journal for it, because you can't always tell what you can and you can't. I mean, the materials are sent to reviewers that you don't know, you don't see, and you don't know what's in their heads.
Yeah. I wanted to follow back with the early experiences just because of my script.
That's
but
fine.
I do want to ask you, what early influences beyond your first memory of actually scripting the wall, so to speak, kind of made you go in the direction of writing? You found certain enjoyment, or you could express yourself?
The part of it was I was sick a lot. as a kid. So I had to spend a lot of time in bed. I was asthmatic. My mother wouldn't let me go out and play with the other children in the neighborhood, what few children there may have been in the neighborhood. So I had to spend, so boredom was a factor.
Yeah.
So I would sit in bed and take my medications, and I would read, and then I would like what I read so much, I would want to write like it. I have a philosophy about this. I think every writer who keeps writing falls in love with other writers. And of course, I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about falling in love with the way they write. And I've had a number of love affairs with writers over the years. My earliest memory was Poe. I fell in love with Poe. I can barely stand to read him now.
No kidding.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, particularly the poetry. The stories I can get, maybe get through, but not the poetry. But he was an early figure. But that's the earliest one I think I can remember where I fell in love. But then I went on from there, and in my adolescence I fell in love with Salinger, J.D. Salinger, and tried to write like him for a while. Hemingway for a while, Faulkner for a while. Faulkner's a love I still have, and so I'm not sure I've quite escaped.
Okay, yeah. You know, that's interesting. In music, especially folkloric music or oral traditions,
Yes.
the imitation of your mentor or your teacher is a high honor. But yet, I think in Western culture and among maybe academic culture, we tend to try to define a point where we break from our mentors and find our
Yes.
What do you think about it? At what point did you say, well, I love Faulkner, I love Salinger, and the imitation is the highest praise and whatnot.
Right.
But we tend to say, okay, we have to break the line at some point. Did you feel that kind of
yes, you struggle with it. At least a writer does struggle with it, but every writer also knows that they do learn through imitation. I tell my students this very frequently, and one of the reasons I think some of them struggle so much with writing, when they do have to write, and often it's I have to, is they have not read very much, and they have not fallen in love with any writing. And when you haven't fallen in love, it's just very difficult to sustain that energy. But yes, I would say that that's the case.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Imitations was for thousands the way writers wrote, painters painted.
Yes, exactly.
Musicians were trained.
That artistic.
We had around the 19th century in the Romantic movement, and then we had the Romantic poets and Romantic critics telling us it was all about originality.
Oh, that's probably where what I just
even though they were furiously imitating Milton. So.
Yeah. Well, I know that in the study of music, playing like your teacher is very important.
Yeah.
And it gets you to a point of familiarity and internalization where then you can express.
And you can have a live teacher. And you can have a live teacher, or you can learn vicariously, which is what we do when we read and we imitate. We fall in love with a writer that's dead, long since dead. You kind of live through them vicariously, and in trying to write in their spirit, if not in their letter.
Okay. Before we take a break, I want to turn to your scholarly work, and something came to written, Rhetoric's Agons.
Yes.
And which is about struggle, I guess, in some way.
Yes.
And you talked about personal struggle. I wonder, as a child, do you think there, and I would like you to explain rhetoric as well. In 2 or 3 words.
Yes, right, I'll try that.
I just thought of this as you said this. Is there some link between your academic interest in, agon, and, your personal experience or whatever?
I think there is, and I think every writer who's honest with him or herself will face strife and struggle. The word agon itself has various meanings. Contest is another one, and writers write out of that. Argumentation, the art of rhetoric, is based on conflict. You're not going to have an act of rhetoric unless you have conflict. You're not going to have an act of rhetoric unless you have struggle. So
something as simple as a difference of opinion, or
exactly
much more serious.
Something as simple as that.
Right.
And rather than resorting to violence, guns, knives, or fisticuffs, one uses words, one uses thoughts, one uses reasoning to struggle with whoever it is you're trying to persuade or convince, and bring them to your point of view if you can. If you can. And that's always the question.
Right, right. Looks like we have about a minute left. I wanted to ask you a bit about your novel that you've written, The Serpent's Sage. What brought you to that story?
A memory I could not shake.
No kidding, yeah.
I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I went with my parents to the Lee County Fair in Sanford, North Carolina, and I wandered away from them and happened into a sideshow, and there was an old black woman sitting in this wooden box eating snakes live, and they were charging to see it. And I stood there fascinated, like people will be fascinated watching a train wreck. Couldn't take my eyes off her. She was swigging black coffee behind the snake meat she was swallowing. I have never been able to shake that memory, and that's the germ of the novel.
We'll come back to that when we
All right.
take a break, and we'll pursue it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Pterosaurs are often called pterodactyls because of the structure of their wing. Pterodactyl, in fact, means winged finger, and the wing did indeed consist solely of a large finger. Pterosaurs was enormously large. A membrane of skin extended from the tip of this finger to either the side of the body or the hind limb.
So now it's midterms, and you seem to be missing some steps between the evolution of winged mammals and the first shuttle? Easier said than done, you say? Well, for starters, try and get down the main points. Then if you have time, get down some examples. Abbreviate frequently used names. Make Martin Luther King. Oedipus Rex can be. Places. Abbreviate any frequently used words. You're also more likely to retain the material if you review your notes as soon as possible and recopy them so they're more legible, highlighting the high points.
You're an individualist, a person who can stand against all adversity.
But your grades suck.
Group study.
The best way to learn is to try and teach someone else. And when you study with someone else, you can compare notes and better determine what will be on the test. You can use the quiz bowl method.
The airspeed velocity of a laden English swallow.
There's safety in numbers.
If there's a problem you all have on a test, you can go to the professor as a group.
And always, try and study with people who are stronger students than yourself.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, welcome back to Why We Write. I'm talking with Dr. Phillip Arrington of EMU's English Language and Literature Department. And we were talking about your novel and the idea that you could not shake, and of a sideshow experience that you had.
Yes.
And then you explored this.
Yes.
What you finally said to yourself, I can't get it out of my mind, I have to write this out. How did that work?
I didn't start, I want the decision. I did not make that decision until I actually had a name for this snake-eating woman. And that occurred on a vacation in Mexico one summer, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And I finally attached a name to her, and then I felt compelled to write the novel.
So you never knew her personally?
I never knew her personally. Okay. I just saw her as another spectator.
Right, and as a child.
As a child, and there were people in there who were nauseated and kind of weirded out by this whole act that she was doing. I mean, it was a geeky act.
Yeah.
But I have told that story to different people, different classes of students, illustrating some particular point I can't even remember now. But I just noticed that it's never left me. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to see if I could find a novel in it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I found one. I don't know, what people can think of it, but I found one, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did it satisfy the thought? Did it?
Yes,
did
it did.
Work? That's
Yes,
interesting.
it did.
Yeah.
Yes, and it also, because I'm working on a second novel now, which is going to be set in the same fictional town that I set the first novel in, and a little bit later on in a different set of characters, different time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Let's talk about that then. When you write, you also work about writing itself. So you are creatively writing.
Yes.
But you teach writing.
Yes.
And you work a lot on persuasion and in the topic of rhetoric and whatever, argumentation or whatever, in the positive sense of the word. So how do you balance those two thoughts? Writing yourself creatively, but then sort of in a sense stepping out. Do you find yourself stepping outside, watching yourself writing, or can you separate those things?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about that disembodied experience where you're dreaming and you see yourself asleep dreaming.
Yeah.
I don't know that I tell my students this because they're prone to say, okay, I'm taking this course in composition, like first year composition, but I really like to be taking this creative writing course. And I usually tell them that I don't like to make that split, that ultimately all writing, and I'm not even sure I like the word creation, because it's fraught with a lot of implications. But all writing,
creative writing,
the
term creative
all writing is you're inventing something that was not there before. You've got a blank piece of paper, you've got a blank screen, and you got to fill it. You have to fill it, or you want it, or it's a have to and want to, but you got to do it. And whether it be a poem or an essay or a novel or what have you, a grocery list, you got to fill it. And so I don't like to encourage the distinction because I think that blocks young writers from using techniques they may have been exposed to in fiction, in imaginative literature, and seeing ways to use it in writing an essay or in an argument.
You think that the fictive approach is useful in the non-fiction?
Oh yes, well, it's not just
in the
me.
academic style.
Yeah, it's not just me. 2,000 years ago,
Right.
Aristotle was telling us if you're going to use examples in making an argument, you can use real historical examples, or you can come up with fictional examples. You can make up a hypothetical.
As if this was happening.
As if, what if this, what if that.
Right, yeah, okay. Okay, I can see that. In your academic writing, do you find that you like to... I haven't read your book on.
That's all right. I haven't read it in a while either.
Rhetoric Sagon. But I was going to talk about the process of writing and thought. I've had occasion to hear other writers speak, especially academic writers and people who teach writing.
Yes.
And they say that actually it's writing. The process is a way of thinking. I wonder if that's something that you were bringing out in your academic writing?
Yes, it is. In fact, I have a whole chapter in Rhetoric Sagon's on the whole concept of writing as a process and connecting it to rhetorical past that I was writing about in previous chapters. The word gets overused, I'm to say, and it seemed to have it caught on in the 60s. The idea of a process. And of course, why we even thought it was anything else but, why we thought that somehow or other Shakespeare simply produced Hamlet one morning when he got up and had his crumpets and tea, and there was no working through that over a long period of time, is beyond me. Every writer has gone through processes of writing. We've just kind of picked the term up, and I think what we've tried to do is we've tried to bring it into the classroom to help students to take them through a process, because they come out of the high schools thinking, well, if their writing doesn't look like the article in Esquire, why not? How come my writing doesn't look that way?
Yeah.
Well, you haven't had a year or so to work on it. You haven't had an army of proofreaders to help you proofread and edit it. You haven't had editorial guidance.
Yeah, there's a whole ecology
layer
behind
yeah,
the whole
there's a
system.
whole layer upon layer of,
Yes,
of people
that's
that are
right.
involved
That's
in the
right.
writing that they see in a textbook or in an anthology versus what they're trying to do.
That touches on teaching, I guess, again.
Yeah.
In allowing the student to feel free. I don't, to teach.
Well, somewhat free, somewhat free.
You're saying there's no, I think you're saying there's no right way, but there are ways that you can, I don't know if perfect is the right word, but improve or keep moving forward on.
Yes,
Yeah.
the right way concept, I mean, there are types of writing, genres of writing, we like to say today, that are much more rigorous and contained in what you've got to do, can't do. This has been pointed out by numerous theorists over the years. You can't exactly get too cute and chummy if you're writing an instruction manual on how to defuse a bomb. Right. There's not much room there for metaphysical conceit or an extended metaphor in the midst of trying to explain how to put your computer together. A lot of students struggle with that part of it too. That every kind of writing presents inventive opportunities, but it excludes other opportunities, other kinds of things that they could do.
Right, good. So storytelling seems to be part of your background system.
It is.
Yeah.
Being from the South, it's hard to avoid it.
Yeah. That's good. Where does the South begin and start, by the way?
It begins in the lower extremities and probably keeps going. Let's put it that way.
Somewhere between the border of Virginia and North Carolina.
The tongue and the toenail. Let's speak about the tongue and the toenail connection, all right?
Okay, that's good. But yeah, I know Southern writers speak that way about. Well, I mean that's and I think it's a stereotype that people enjoy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't exploit a stereotype.
Does storytelling, personal memory, come into a lot of what you write about? How does that?
Well, I was just working on a part of my new novel, and I was in a moment of writer's block because I had created this character based on this guy that used to wander the streets of my hometown.
Oh, okay.
He was
a real person.
A real person, World War II veteran. He had a steel plate in his war. He'd been wounded in a couple of different places, but he was pretty much mute and inarticulate, and he wandered around picking up cans and bottles. But I wanted to build a character around him, and I wanted him to be able to rant and attack the town that he lived in. And I didn't know how to do it. I got him described. I could see him. I could remember what he looked like. But I didn't know exactly how he was going to sound. So for 3 days, I avoided it. I wrote something else, or I did something else, because I had not solved it. And then I took a walk one day. I try to walk whenever possible, and the weather permitting, and a line or two came to me of what he could say.
What he would say.
Yeah. And then I was able to break through that.
And this is something that's a little bit outside his character because, as you said, he was
he was almost inarticulate. He would mumble. He was known throughout town for becoming a loiterer, and also he was known for his endowments. I won't pursue that, but he was just a figure that looms out of my childhood.
Yeah.
I saw him around town all the way from the time I could go downtown to the time I left that town. So he was 18 or 19 years old.
That's amazing. I mean, he's been in your mind a long time.
I can't forget it.
Yeah, actually,
I worked with his son. I later worked with his son. His son went to high school with me. He had 2 sons, and I worked with him for a while. But I haven't been able to shake him. He's kind of like the snake eater. Yeah. He's in my memory, and he's popped up now in this new novel.
Very interesting. Yeah. We've got a couple minutes to close things off. I really enjoy talking about teaching, but I don't want to talk just about that. Is there anything you've been working on lately in your academic research that you're pursuing? It's like hot on the front burner.
The one thing I do that probably a lot of teachers don't do, and I'm not saying this to brag, I write with my students. I write with them. Mm-hmm. I give them an assignment. I try to do the assignment with them.
That's interesting.
And I present them with my work. I let them comment on it. I take their flowers. I take their tomatoes. Mm-hmm. I encourage them to throw the flowers and the tomatoes. And then I also hope they will see that I do certain things, so it will permit them to try certain things too. I don't know that many teachers do that.
No, and I think that's a great way to take it out, actually, on that thought. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And I will just tell our audience that you're listening to Why We Write. We've been here with Phillip Arrington of EMU's English and Literature and Language Department, English Language and Literature Department, and my name is Randall Beyer. I hope to be with you again. Thanks for being with us.